hope is one of the most important things we have as human beings. And that this tardigrade was the perfect example of hope. When things get really bad, it doesn't die. It just closes down and waits for things to get better. And you don't wait for things to get better unless fundamentally you hope. I found that that was a very beautiful metaphor. I'm fascinated by the idea of life beyond our planet. And I think that we really, truly underestimate the possibility of the survival of life. I'm not saying that there's necessarily intelligent life next door, but I think we'll be surprised if we're ever lucky enough to be able to examine these things properly. Art should touch your soul. So even if it's very complex, there should be something in it that allows you to know whether it's something you like or you don't.
Welcome to InSPiRaTiOnS, podcast show about art, positivity and enthusiasm. And here is your host, Juliana Marinkovic.
Hello everyone, and I'm happy to be with you in another episode. This will be a different kind of an episode. Inspiration for it happened to me back in April or May of this year, 2017, when I was in Cork Opera House. And for our international listeners, that is in City Cork in Ireland. And there I was listing the program of upcoming performances. And at some point, I open a page and I see the title, Extraterrestrial Events. And in this show, we will actually present the whole idea behind this dance opera, which was choreographed by Philip Connaughton, and he will be my guest in this episode. So I'm reading the description of Extraterrestrial Events, and I'm seeing that it is based on the archives of GEIPAN. For you who don't know, GEIPAN is an official French organization that collects and investigates reports of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. GEIPAN is a French acronym that stands for Group for Study and Information of Unidentified Atmospheric Phenomena. So it is an official French organization that investigates UFOs under the umbrella of French Space Agency, CNES, which is a French equivalent of American NASA. And that immediately drew my attention because in December of 2006, for one of my journalistic assignments, I conducted an exclusive interview with head of GEIPAN, which was a Mr. Jacques Patenet, who at the time exclusively announced for me that French UFO documents and statistics will be released in a few months. And that actually happened in 2007, when worldwide media picked the story. So I had exclusive at the time, few months before that release. And here is a short excerpt from that interview that happened in 2006, so you could get even deeper insight about the GEIPAN's mandate in France. What is the history of the official UFO research in France? Can you give us a short summary? How has all started?
Yes. In fact, GEIPAN was created in 1977 in CNES in order, I think, to have a civil official organization for UFO phenomenal study. And I think there were there is always today also, three reasons for creating this entity. First, a scientific one, to try to explain unknown phenomena. Second one is a civic mission in order to give to the public, to the population, an official response in analysis of the phenomena. And the third reason is a security reason. If really we have ships or unidentified ships above the French territory, it can be a problem for the national defense and security.
So when I saw that this dance opera was based on GEIPAN, I was so intrigued and so interested that I started to dig even more. That is how I discovered the work of amazing and unique artist Philip Connaughton from Dublin, who created Extraterrestrial Events dance opera. And while I was researching, I was discovering other Philip's projects, and I was so amazed that I said, I have to interview this guy, I have to learn more about him, about his work, about his inspiration. And I'm so happy that in today's episode we will be able to speak about extraterrestrial events. Everyone is invited to it, so it will be performed on October 24th at 8 p.m. in Cork Opera House. So in a minute we will have Philip online, who will speak to us from Dublin. On October 24th, this coming Tuesday, a dance opera, Extraterrestrial Events, by choreographer Philip Connaughton, will be performed in Cork Opera House. And I'm so happy that we have Philip online tonight, who will give us the best insight into this intriguing piece, and we will also invite audience to experience it. I know that I'm proudly keeping my ticket already, so thank you, Philip, for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
When I was preparing for this show, I was thinking this will be a really nice interview that I will be able to embed around the upcoming dance piece. And as I was digging more and more about your career, I was becoming more and more amazed about your achievements and with your evolution of you as an artist and with your other pieces. So I could see interchangeable connections and how one thing led to another, and it will be such a wasted actually opportunity not to cover these things too. But I guess we have to start stereotypically with your initial spark, how you decided to be an artist. And I do recall when I was researching, I found the reference that you had your Billy Elliot moment when you were very young. So maybe you can describe that scene to us.
Well, let me see now. I think it just, my father was actually, which is not particularly like Billy Elliot in a way, but my father was a big musical theater fan, and I was from a family of kind of 5 boys in North Dublin, and I suddenly got it into my head that I wanted to dance. And I suppose I was the 5th boy. So, my parents had stopped kind of bullying. I think they were probably exhausted, with all of the others kind of trying to control them, that by the time I said, I want to go and dance, and they let me. I think when they brought me to see a pantomime with an Irish, very kind of famous Irish actress at the time, Maureen Potter, and when I was about 5, and she called me up on stage. Some kids would be brought up on stage and they'd be asked to kind of sing or do a little dance or something, and I was blown away by this. I couldn't believe it. I think my parents said that I was like high for a week. It was the only thing I could talk about, because I think that the funny thing about it is that a child seeing live performance or live theater, it's very interesting because they're still at that stage where imagination and reality can blend into one, that there's not such a clear separation between the two, even though they can differentiate. So as a kid, when I saw this imaginary, amazing world happening on stage and was able to step up into it, it was like being able to step into your fantasy land in a fantasy world, and it blew my mind. So I think that stuck.
Yeah, and was there a situation when you tried to dance Swan Lake in the hallway of your house? And
Oh yeah, I mean, it was kind of strange. I don't know who would have been said. Like, I mean, I had no idea what Swan Lake was. I think somebody must have said Swan Lake to me, and I kind of made this this kind of idea about it, and I think I was dancing around in the hallway in my underwear quite happily, and I'd actually really love the opportunity to be able to see that, because I just what your the concept I must have had of what Swan Lake was versus the reality of Swan Lake must have been kind of very interesting, I think.
Yeah, and your parents were very supportive of your interest, and I think you were in Ballymun, and there was not a lot there where you could train, so you have to go to city center, right?
Oh my God, right, yeah. So absolutely, like Ballymun was a rough kind of north side Dublin suburb, and although they're and still to this day, I went on to become, they built a theatre in Ballymun, which is Access Ballymun, which actually supports me quite a lot. And I became artist in residence there many years later, dance artist in residence. And I absolutely love it. And I'm aware of the amazing talent that's out there. But definitely at the time when I was 5, I mean, there wasn't anything really going on around there that I knew of anyway. And so I kind of, I think I went to Irish dancing lessons and I didn't really like it. I think it was mainly because the first day I went, I was made hold hands with this girl and she had really sweaty hands and I didn't like it. But then my dad, who was a big Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire fan, he thought tap dancing is what you need. And actually, I think I wanted to play the violin. I made my first communion or something, and with the money I wanted the violin, and my parents said to me, no, that's too noisy. We're going to send you to tap dancing classes, which is kind of ironic in a sense, because tap dancing is really noisy. I'd say it was probably because it was cheaper, to tell you the truth. But I was very happy with my tap dancing.
And one thing led to another, and in the end you got scholarship in London when you were 15, right?
Yes, yeah. So I kind of then I kind of got very involved in it, and I had this wonderful French lady who kind of took me on as her protege and gave me private lessons in classical ballet. And then I started kind of going abroad, going to London to the Royal Academy, and then when I was 15, I got a scholarship. I got a place in Rambert School of Contemporary Dance, and then I was funded by the Irish Arts Council. I had a bursary from the Irish Arts Council, which allowed me to continue my training there. And these days, I don't even know if that exists anymore, but it would have been absolutely impossible for me to train abroad. A family of 5 boys, working class family, my parents didn't earn a lot of money. So it was such an amazing opportunity that I had, and going to such an amazing school. And then I got to really kind of, how would you say, to kind of, practice my profession and perfect it.
Yeah. And you also mentioned contemporary dance. I guess today it's hard to be in Ireland and not to be exposed to it, but can you maybe explain for our international listeners too this type of genre and how it was developing through time and what actually it represents?
Well, I suppose contemporary dance is basically, I suppose if you think of classical dance, classical ballet, which takes you up into, the 20th century, and then from mid-20th century, it becomes, modern, postmodern. You have the great artists like Nijinsky that's started to really develop and push the boundaries of classical dance and look for new forms and new aesthetics. And as that developed further, just like plastic art, just like painting, people were constantly pushing the boundaries of what form was and what style was, and different ways of looking at how the body could express itself. and modern dance, eventually started shifting away from classical ballet and becoming slightly more abstract, like abstract art, losing its narrative form. So it stopped telling stories like Swan Lake and, Giselle and all of these other things, and started to look for more complex concepts and try to express itself in a different way. And I suppose contemporary dance is the continuation of that. And it's still constantly growing and moving and shifting. And when I went to Rambert at 15, we had classes in contemporary dance and classes in classical ballet. So we trained in both of those genres. So normally, I suppose at the time, contemporary dance would have been barefoot, and slightly more austere. I don't know if that's the right word, but just kind of much more pulling out, looking for a cleaner, kind of purer form, which was much more contemporary.
Yeah, and I think you explained it really nicely, especially this abstract part, because maybe some viewers, when they have first encounter with this type of genre, could feel some kind of a pressure. Maybe there is some gap. They are trying to rationalize it. They are asking themselves, can I understand this? What is this all about? But I think you also once really nicely explained that in another interview that I heard, where you said, just trust yourself, enjoy yourself, think about it over the night, and you will find it inside yourself. So just don't feel too much pressed, right? That will be sort of a direction.
Absolutely. I have a very good example. I mean, again, going back to my family, and, so I went off to London and, came back after so many years, and actually it was just so different at the time, and I suddenly was performing in this piece in the RHA Gallery in Dublin, in the basement of this piece. It was a piece by this Irish choreographer, John Scott, and it was just kind of really crazy. I had to come out and there was this big candelabra, and I had to throw it to the ground and thrash about the place and dance, and it was just kind of madness. It was a fun piece. It was great. And my mother came to see this piece, and she had never seen anything like this. And first of all, it was in the basement of an art gallery, so there were no seats. That she was horrified by this. She was just like, "What the hell is this? What have we sent? We spent all all of this effort. What is this? Yeah. And now we don't even have a seat to watch you." And it was quite funny. As I was dancing it, I came out and I kicked all of these candles and the candelabra over the place. And she turned around to this person next to her and she said, "He's very bold. He's very bold." And she couldn't separate, her son from the act. And but just through exposure, and I suppose coming to see me, over a period of 20 years, performing all over the world in different things, and she'd come and visit and she'd see things. Just through the exposure, she really gained an understanding or a self-confidence in being able to like something or not like it. Sometimes we get frightened by things because we think, I won't understand what that is. But fundamentally, art isn't like that. Art should touch your soul. So even if it's very complex, there should be something in it that allows you to know whether it's something you like or you don't. Yes. I suppose also there's another level of it, which means that the more you're exposed to it, the more you can gain a taste for certain things. Like there are some things you'll like more than others. But definitely my mother became very eloquent and very clear about, understanding it, I'd say. And not liking certain things as well.
Yeah. Like we said, you also have a huge international experience, and I think you were 14 years in Barcelona, you were also in Paris, and through all these cities. So maybe you can speak a little bit about these experiences too, but while you were there you were always also maintaining your connections with Dublin, and you were working with the Liz Roach Dance Company and so on.
Yes. So I after I finished my training, I worked for a little while in London, and then I think I was at the Bayerische Staatsoper in Munich, and then I decided to move to Barcelona. I was very excited by this city, and I danced with a company there called Rami Levy. He was a choreographer who danced with Kohlberg Ballet and then had danced with Batsheva in Israel also. And he was very exciting kind of choreographer. After I finished with him, I was working for 5 years with a company called Thomas Noon Dance and also in Barcelona. And and I ended up going as a dancer, particularly as a dancer, you have to, it's a kind of, how would you say, it's not a sedentary life, obviously, and you generally tend to go where the work is. You follow the work, and it takes you all over the place, which has been very exciting. And also, particularly when I've started making my own work, to be able to bring your own work to different countries is really quite wonderful as well.
Yeah. And at some point, I think around 2011, you were in New York at the Judson Church, where you also met John Kinsell. I think that will have some connection later with Mortis as Philippus play, right?
That's right. Actually, when I was at Judson Church, I had a residency there, and I created my first solo, which was a piece called Embody. And then while I was there, I met this other artist, John Kinsell, who's a very kind of well-known choreographer, very successful choreographer in New York, performance artist and choreographer. And he was coming to Dublin, and he asked me to perform in a piece of his. And I did that, and at the time that's when I was dance artist in residence at Access Ballymun, and we ended up performing there, and I performed my piece Mortis as Philippus there as part of the Dublin Dance Festival in 2013, I think. So it was very very exciting times. That was the beginning of when I really started concentrating on my own choreographic career. I mean, I'd always been in and out of doing my own work, but I think from that time I based myself in Ireland again, and I was really happy to be back here, and it's just kind of taken off from there.
Yeah, and was there when your collaboration with Michael Galan also started with Mortis, or you know him?
Yes, absolutely. So I met Michael. Actually, I was performing in a piece in Paris, and I was staying at the Centre Culturel Irlandais, and he was there doing a residency as well, and we bumped into each other, got to know each other, and ended up working together. He did the music, so now we have a very long-standing relationship. He's done the music for Mortis as Philippus, the piece I did in 2014 called Tardigrade, and he's done this latest work, Extraterrestrial Events. So it's been very interesting actually working with a composer over several pieces, because you really gain a language, and because they're two, like music and dance are technically very different. So to kind of make those worlds gel, you have to have a very good working relationship and know somebody quite well, so that you can say, get your ideas across clearly.
Absolutely. From some kind of basic perspective, I would say he's something like your own John Williams, and you are Steven Spielberg, right?
Absolutely. I'm sure he'd be delighted with that.
And can you say a little bit more about Mortis as Philippus? What is the basic idea of the performance? A little bit about that.
Mortis as Philippus was a piece that was initially created. I thought about creating it after the death of my father, which was in about 2012. And it's just, I suppose, when something like you lose a parent or a sibling or somebody that's close to you, it's an existential moment in your life, and it really you really begin to put things into perspective and to clarify things in a way, particularly in my circumstance, that hadn't happened before. And so I wanted to it was kind of confusing initially, because initially I suppose I thought the piece was about my father, and it's definitely dedicated to my father. But the piece is called Mortis es Philippus, Philip is dead. And I think that I realized, only with time did I realize it was about my own fear of mortality. So it's very interesting, because when I first made the piece, it was quite cathartic. And I was so emotionally attached to everything that was happening, I suppose because I was still hurting a lot over my father's death. And then 2 years ago, I was asked to perform it again in France in a festival in Chalon-sur-Saône, which is an amazing place. They have a really wonderful festival there, Festival Instance. And they asked me to perform this piece again, and I'd kind of put it to sleep. So when I took it back, I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, I'm too emotionally attached, or when I was too emotionally attached to everything. So I reshuffled the piece, I reworked it, and I changed it, and I kind of took a lot of the emotion out of it. And it actually, ironically, then became a much stronger piece. So I was very happy with the end result. I basically found a scientific paper that listed every single way that you can possibly die, in categories. So, cancer, respiratory diseases, blah, blah, blah. And then within those categories, each individual way that you could die. And I decided to learn them off by heart and recite them during the piece. So as the piece is happening, I'm reciting every single way. So I start, I don't know what I start with. I think I start with like some sort of blood-related diseases, everything, from, I don't know, HIV to, I don't know. And then I go through the cancers but to remember them, I used choreographic structures. So I'd use a dance to remember a certain section. So respiratory diseases, I'd use a dance. The cancers, I would go in and whisper the cancers into people's ears in the audience. People that really freaked people out. They were really freaked out by that. But I also drank a bottle of wine on stage, which was kind of fun when you're performing in France, because you can get good wine. But it was about pushing the limits of my own mortality, and also playing with the idea of death. Like sometimes we're so frightened of cancer and we're so frightened of saying these things, but actually, if you say the word, you kind of you weaken it. You become strong to it, and it doesn't become such a phantasm,
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting experience.
Yeah, and it also shows that these performances are always, they have the state of progress, the state of development. They are sort of sometimes upgraded. I do recall Michael Galan also said he has a draft, but it is rewritten so many times. You go even to the tests that you are doing, and then you rewrite again. So even, like you said, after the piece is done, you can revisit it again in the future, and you can change it again.
You can always change it. I think that there's always something that's fundamental in a piece, is that it's the essence is something that doesn't change. Because when you make a piece, you have this idea inside your head, you have this feeling inside your head, and that for me is always clear, that initial idea. And so as long as that's intact, you can shift around with things, because you're being true to the piece as long as you're being true to that initial idea, I think.
Yeah. And now in 2014, you had this absolutely exotic piece called Tardigrade, for which Sophie Gorman gave amazing review, and it's really sort of has so many multidisciplinary aspects in it, and even the name itself represents a microanimal less than 1 millimeter long. Tardigrades can survive very harsh environments. And can you speak a little bit about that, because that will also have impact later even in Extraterrestrial Events, your upcoming dance piece in Cork?
Yes, I think that was kind of a breakthrough moment for me, Tardigrade. So Tardigrade is the name of the piece, and it's also the name of this extremophile. An extremophile is this little animal or any type of creature, I suppose, that can live in incredibly extreme conditions. And I don't think I initially started out with the tardigrade. I had read a book called The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. About it's a book that's written, oh my God, I won't do it justice. I think it's written at the beginning of the 20th century. But anyway, it's about him traveling into the Congo, and he's kind of becomes very aware of how people are mistreated, and slightly not disassociated from Roger Casement, you know. But anyway, I'd been when he talks about deepest, darkest Africa, there's this luscious, exotic quality to the way he writes and describes this place, and it just seemed magical and otherworldly. And so I deliberately wanted to deal with this idea of this physical place. And I was, well, when I was in Madrid, when I was in Spain, I had seen Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights, this amazing triptych that's in the Reina Sofia, I think, in Madrid. And this amazing kind of study of color and life and morality and humanity in all its shapes and forms really blew my mind. And there was something that I could relate to that idea of Joseph Conrad's Africa in The Heart of Darkness. And so I started working with some dancers and creating some material, and I was looking for something monstrous within that, the unknown, you know, this place, this territory that's luscious and beautiful and unknown. And I was kind of looking for monsters, and I found this picture of this monster, and I was like, what is this monster? And it was actually a blown up microscopic photo of a tardigrade. And so I began to kind of investigate this tardigrade creature, and these animals are absolutely fascinating. And they kind of, you know, when their environment is too harsh, they kind of shrivel up into this little kind of shell, which is called a tun state. And they can last, like their body water content goes down to like kind of 0.01% or something ridiculous. I mean, they just literally dry up and they turn into this little seed, and they can last like this for, I don't know, at least 10 years, if not, 40, or they don't know how many years, because there's no clear kind of paperwork on it as of yet. But NASA have brought these creatures into space and studied them in space. They kind of released them into, full radioactive spatial environment, and then brought them back to Earth. And when they brought them back, they reproduced. So these are creatures that have gone, beyond our stratosphere into space, and that have actually come back and have been able to survive in the vacuum of space, which is absolutely incredible. And of course, it supports all of these theories of panspermia. Panspermia being this idea that life was brought to Earth in meteors or whatnot.
Yeah, it is a theory by astronomer Fred Hoyle.
So they're fascinating creatures. But when I kind of thought, how do I involve this creature into the piece? I decided I was very similar to Mortis S. Philippus. I thought, let's not get emotional. let's try and stay scientific with this, because people can find the beauty in things without me trying to give it to them, So I decided, while the dance was going on and while all of these different things were happening on stage at the same time, I would give a scientific lecture on the tardigrade, with projection and slides. And as the piece began to develop, I realized that this one of the main themes that passes through all of my work is the idea of hope. I think hope is one of the most important things we have as human beings. And that this tardigrade was the perfect example of hope, because when things get really bad, when things get really difficult, it doesn't die. It just closes down and waits. And it waits for things to get better. And you don't wait for things to get better unless fundamentally somewhere in there you hope that things will get better. And that I found that was a very beautiful metaphor. I'm not saying that that's what the tardigrade actually does, but it became a very beautiful metaphor for that, and this little creature that is able to survive almost everything. But one of the another little story on that was, I thought, oh my God, I had a friend who was doing a master's in Trinity in microbiology and whatnot, and I said, oh, can I borrow a microscope from you? Because I thought if I'm going to study these creatures, I have to study them. I have to find them. Where do I find a tardigrade?
Wow.
Well, they're absolutely everywhere. At the time, I was living in Glasnevin in Dublin, and I had on my roof, I went up with a ladder one day and I got a bit of moss, and I'd found that they like a kind of a place that gets wet and gets dry and gets wet. So walls and moss are particularly good. And so I soaked it in this Petri dish and got my microscope, and literally within the first 3 hours, I'd found like 3 different species of tardigrade. And there were hundreds and hundreds of species of tardigrade, by the way, and that you can find them absolutely everywhere. Into the Mariana Trench, you'll find them. You'll find them up beside volcanoes. You'll find they're absolutely everywhere. That's why they're extremophiles. And so I started to watch and study these creatures, and it became like watching a soap opera or a Mexican soap opera. I was like totally addicted to it. Every night I'd come home from rehearsals and I'd get the microscope out, and one is killing somebody else has had babies, somebody's having an affair with somebody. It was just like I became really intense with the world of tardigrades, but that was quite an interesting experience.
Wow, Philip, that was so amazing to hear, and I haven't heard this anywhere else. And it shows your research approach, actually, and I was so blown away by this. And you're absolutely correct. Even by the asteroid impact, these creatures have potential to survive and to be a spark of life again. And that's a hope, like you said. And even the exoplanet debate, it shows that maybe the planets that are not in Goldilocks zone, they are maybe harsh environments, but there could be a possibility eventually maybe that some life forms could survive there. So there are debates based on these extremophiles that we are taking even in modern science. But I'm so blown away with that you were so devoted and that you researched it so deeply.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm fascinated by the idea of life beyond our planet, and I think that we really truly underestimate life and the possibility of the survival of life. And I think that when we start to look, we will find it absolutely everywhere. I think it's just it's a very naive concept to think that life needs just water and oxygen and very basic earth kind of traits for it to survive. I'm not saying that there's necessarily intelligent life next door, but I think we'll be surprised if we're ever lucky enough to be able to examine these things properly, that we'll see it everywhere.
Before we go even deeper into that subject, let's continue for now with chronological overview of your career. And I think in 2014 you also had a show called Neither Either, which was a collaboration of 2 dance companies, Maiden Voyage and Liz Roach Dance Company. I think it was happening in Northern Ireland. So can you speak a little bit about that period too?
Yes, Neither Either was a piece that was choreographed by Liz Roach Dance Company, and she asked me to perform in it, and I was absolutely delighted to do that. It was based on the work of the poet Seamus Heaney, and we performed it all over Ireland, actually, both north and south. We performed it at the Mac in Belfast and Project Arts Centre in Dublin, and it was a really, really great experience. Also for me, it's a very, and still, as a choreographer, I'm still very interested in working for other people. For all sorts of reasons. One, as an artist in Ireland, you have to be very versatile, and you have to make, you have to, I wouldn't be happy just working for myself, even though that's what I do most of the time. But also, I think artistically, it's really great to work for other people because it feeds you. You can feed their work, but they can also feed your work. And there's a back and forth of ideas and inspiration. And I've had a long... I've worked with Liz Roach Company for many, many years, and I absolutely love her work and her choreographic approach, which is very different to mine, but it's really, really, she's a really, really talented artist.
Mm-hmm. What was the basic idea behind that piece?
It was quite an abstract piece, and we worked with some of Seamus Heaney's text, and there were 4 dancers, I think, and it was quite an abstract piece, but it was very complex, choreographically complex, and. I don't know. It was such a pleasure to do. Liz is an interesting choreographer because when you work with her, she doesn't always tell you. I mean, she tells you what you're doing, of course, but she doesn't give you the bigger picture. So sometimes it's a bit like life. You go through her piece and you're not necessarily sure of the role of everyone else. You just have to be clear with what you're doing, which is kind of like life, right? I mean, we don't know what everyone else's role is going to be. We just try and control what we're doing and not get in the wrong place.
Yeah. In 2016, there was a piece that I absolutely love. I adore this piece. It's whack. It's crazy, violent tour of force. I think somebody said with scars and fractured ribs. And you collaborated there with French superstar Ashley Chen. And can you talk a little bit about that idea? I think it started in Brussels in 2007 or something like that.
Yes, it started a long time ago in Brussels in 2007. We were in a studio, and Ashley and I are the best of friends, and we have a slightly kind of violent friendship in the sense that we like to fight. And I think I was running around the studio and he started throwing shoes at me, and it was hurting, but it was kind of, we were laughing, and then we decided to record it. And then we forgot about it completely. But Ashley has his own choreographic career in France, and I'm working here. And we decided that at the stage that we were at, it would be very interesting to make a collaboration because, one thing is making your own work, but another thing is actually having to balance your opinions and your ideas, and the democracy of a collaboration with another choreographer is a whole different experience, And so we decided to do that. And being our natural selves, it turned into this very, very violent piece called Whack. I mean, the title says it all. Yes. And we created this. I think we opened it in Paris in 2015, I think. And since then, it's been performed all over the world. But yes, it's really violent. And we found this video that we had made in 2007 in Brussels. And we were like, oh my God, this is perfect for the show. So it's actually, the show begins with this moment where I'm running around the stage and Ashley is hurting me with these shoes. And, I have to really keep an eye on the shoes that he's throwing because sometimes his wife's shoes get in there and they've got like big heels and stuff like that. And that's just very dangerous. But so while we were rehearsing it, I fractured a rib. I broke Ashley's toe. I lost a filling, so it's kind of dangerous. Yeah, it's dangerous. But we've had a lot of success with that piece. We performed it now. We toured Ireland with it. We were in New York with it. We've all over France. We've got performances well into 2019. And I'm 42 now, and I had said that this was my final year of This was my final year of doing such a violent piece, but we keep getting asked to other places, so I have to say yes.
Yeah, and that's it. When I was looking that, immediately I was able to connect with it. There is some basic core. I mean, it was like watching a cartoon or something like that. There are some kind of pure emotions that you can immediately connect to. And I guess that's something that attracts people to it. I mean, you can look at it at many different perspectives. It is funny. It has such amount of effort that went into it. Oh my God, your control, and you have to be so synchronized not to hurt each other. I mean, it's amazing piece, I think. Absolutely amazing.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Well, it's true that I don't think I could dance that piece with many people because, I mean, Ashley and I have a career. We've worked together for 14 years as well, I think, on and off. And we know each other very well. And I'd be very cautious about doing that with somebody else. And so yeah, you have to be careful. If I throw myself across that room and there's no one there to hit off, then it's going to be really dangerous. But it's also that piece is also about the human quality of if you fail, you get up and you try again, and you always come back and you try again. And so it's similar to Mortis as Philip is, and similar to Tardigrade in that sense that we're not giving up. There's that sense of let's continue, let's do this, let's find a way through it.
And I think you had some injury on the stage in France while the audience was watching, and they were sort of laughing like they're thinking it was part of the show, but it was actual injury.
Yes, it was. That's when I fractured my rib, and a fractured rib is very, very painful. And luckily, we just had kind of 15 minutes left on stage, and I can't leave the stage, so you just have to. You have deal with it. And so Ashley kind of bumped into me at one stage, and we'd been doing really dangerous things, and then suddenly he just touched off me and my rib went, and I was like, and the French audience were just like, oh, this Irish man, he's so funny. Oh, he's pretending to die on stage, but I actually was dying on stage. I managed to get to the end of the performance, and actually there's not a lot you can do with a fractured rib. You just have to sit it out.
And you also researched wrestling moves actually for the choreography of the show.
Yes, we did. We found kind of all of this we went through kind of these wrestling manuals, and we're looking for different types of kind of, especially in the more kind of theatrical forms of wrestling,
Oh yeah.
Ways of hurting each other and that weren't really hurting each other. But we researched the whole thing.
Yeah, that's also sort of a choreography too. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And you notice that kids go absolutely crazy for it. They completely love this piece.
Oh my God, kids! It's funny because it's not a kids show per se.
Yeah.
But it's very funny because adults can take things really to heart, and kids have this way of just kind of finding the lightness in things. And from the moment, and they're also slightly masochistic, I think, because from the moment that I kind of come out on stage and Ashley is really hurting me with his shoes, you can hear the kids are just going, yeah, no, yeah, no, or going, I wish they'd just stop, I wish they'd just stop. It's like one or the other. But yeah, they really get into it. And we had a performance, I think, actually when we performed it in Cork, when we were touring at the Frickin' Crane, there were kids in the audience that were just like, do you think that was, I think that's the most painful thing that's happened. Yeah, they were like having a conversation in the audience, and it was great to see them so excited and interacting with something that was happening live on stage, as opposed to feeling that they had to sit there and be quiet, and they were being honest about it, and it was really great.
Yeah. And now we are going into upcoming performance of this Tuesday, October 24th in Cork Opera House. It's a dance opera titled Extraterrestrial Events. And before we start to talk about it, let's listen the first audio clip from the performance itself that Philip has prepared for this interview. And thank you, Philip, once again for that. It is a beautiful piece called Baby Scene. Baby Scene from a dance opera Extraterrestrial Events. You are hearing a glimpse into the performance that we will be able to see this Tuesday in Cork Opera House. The inspiration from WAC was sort of connected with Extraterrestrial Events piece. While you were touring in France, somehow you were able to discover the existence of GEIPAN. So can you talk a little bit how you got in touch with all these references to this GEIPAN organization of French Space Agency?
Yes. So while I was touring with WAC, I think we were in Normandy, in a town in Normandy, and we were in this apartment and, before a show, and there was a Libération, the French newspaper was there, and I opened it up, and I'd been thinking that I wanted to deal with the idea of truth or lack of truth in a piece. And I had initially wanted to use kind of the idea of paranormal, and but I actually, the truth of the matter is, I went to see a show in Paris, and it was absolutely amazing. I can't remember the name of it now, but and it was kind of. They'd already done it. So as soon as I saw that show, they weren't dealing with truth per se, but they dealt with the idea of paranormal the way I'd like to. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that now. What am I going to do? Because that happens at times, you know.
Yes.
And so I was reading, I opened the Libération and I saw that there was an article on this new book, a study by a French sociologist called Arnaud Esquer. And he'd written a book called Théorie des événements extraterrestres, which is theory of extraterrestrial events. And basically, he did this very interesting study of UFO sighting reports. And he got his UFO sighting reports from this kind of subgroup of the National Center for Space Studies in France, which is called GEIPAN. Which was the group for GEIPAN is a group for study and investigation of unidentified flying objects. Yeah. And basically, what happens in France is, since the 50s or since the I'd say 50s, if you see a UFO, you call the police or the authorities, and they put you in touch with GEIPAN. Now, the name GEIPAN has changed over the years, but it's always basically been the same thing. And then they study your case, and they interview you. They look at the night sky, the night you saw what you saw. So they study every aspect of this case, the angle that you were looking at the sky, what you saw, blah, blah. And then after they've investigated the case, they categorize your report into one of four groups. Well, it's actually, I think it's five. It's basically Group A, B, C, D, or D1. And depending on how likely your sighting was a UFO or not. And so if it was absolutely not a UFO, they'd put it in Group A, and then D1 and D2, I think it is, are like most definitely UFOs that, they can't prove that it wasn't a UFO. So it's a fascinating archive, and this archive is public, and you can go online and find it. And all of the case histories are absolutely there. And so I suppose this became really interesting, and so I decided to get in touch with Arnaud Esquer and speak to him about it. And he's this incredibly successful sociologist that's written all these books, and I thought he's never going to want to speak to me. But he got in touch with me straight away, and we had, we met and had some meetings, and he was really excited by the idea of me creating this piece. Now, the piece is inspired by his book in the sense that I love what he was doing with it, but I kind of appropriated the theme. Because so Arnaud studies these cases. Basically, he kind of does a linguistic analysis of certain case studies of UFO sighting reports, and basically the language that people use. So if I'm telling you a story and I want to convince you that it's true, the language that I use will change depending on whether I believe it's true or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, for example, if I'm telling you something that happened to me today and it really happened, I tend to be chronological in the way I explain it. So, I walked down the street, then the bus came along, then I got on the bus, and then, the fire started or something like that. So it's always chronological. If you start to mess with the chronology of a story and make it slightly more literary, there tends to be much less possibility that the story is actually true. Oh, yeah. So it's a very, very fascinating book because you read about all of these nuances and details in telling stories that are fundamentally true or not true. And so that's why he used these UFO sighting reports. And he's not putting into question whether they saw UFOs or they didn't see the UFOs, or whether UFOs exist or they don't exist. He's putting into question whether they believe what they're telling is true or not. So that was a very interesting thing, and that's how I started my research on the whole thing, and it kind of took off from there.
Yeah, it was, like you said, linguistic analysis, and there are patterns there, and like you said, I really like this idea of chronological representation to give the best details to a person. You are carrying with your story, you are paying attention, and like you said, we have other opposite perspective when you are trying to romanticize the story. And
when you're trying to romanticize, but also there's things like the way you describe the geography within the story, the geographical setting of the story, the way you describe noises and sounds, the way that there are certain patterns that repeat themselves to be emphatic or, to emphasize certain points. All of these things are kind of very interesting markers as to the veracity of what you're explaining.
And that is what actually drew me to this piece. And I think I was in Cork Opera House speaking programs in April or May of this year. And I'm listening through the shows, and I see extraterrestrial events. That sounds interesting. And then I look into the description text, and I was blown away that you actually took the GEIPAN. And I'm telling you that because back in December 2006, I actually interviewed the head of GEIPAN at the time, which was Mr. Jacques Patenet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they were just preparing to release the UFO documents and statistics on the website. And it was an exclusive interview at the time because the announced release of documents happened several months after that. And that is when the mainstream media captured the news worldwide. So I had that information several months before the big release. And that is what I immediately connected and drew me to your piece. And I actually checked of today, for example, they have 2,564 cases, which is the total of all categories that they are collecting. So on the website, they are listing 4 categories of cases. Category A stands for completely identified phenomena. Category B stands for probably identified phenomena. Category C represents unidentified phenomena, but due to the lack of data, so it can go either way. And category D stands for unidentified phenomena, but after the complete investigation. Class A, which is, like you said, completely identified cases, there are currently 479, and these are that you analyzed and that you adapted to a piece. And in your research and evaluation of these cases that you were preparing for your dance piece, have you ever tried to consider maybe classification D, which are completely unidentified cases that could also give premise for a show, or you already had the skeleton and the book, and that is the reason why you went into that direction for classification A?
Well, I mean, within the book, I think he goes through several classifications, but I decided to stick with classification A, which were the classification that, had been totally identified.
Yes.
Because I didn't want to get into the argument of, is it real or is it not real, or what's, I wanted to be just quite clear that there was a sense of denial that was going on with the main character of the piece, who's Kim Sheehan. She's this amazing opera singer, this coloratura soprano that is the main character of the piece. And so, yes, absolutely, we could have used anything, but I wanted to use a type of language. I wanted to use. I just wanted to use things that weren't questionable, actually. And even having said that doesn't mean that they weren't there. It just means that it was an easier kind of mental decision for me not to have to play with too much ambiguity, because there's already a lot of ambiguity in the piece, and in the sense of, is it real or is it not? So I just didn't want the stories to take it in too much of that direction as well. I also, because for me the piece is about truth, or I'll tell you what it is. It's about that the gray area between truth and falsity is fascinating for me. And that I think sometimes we see the world as a black and white place. It can either be one thing or the other. And it's not. It's very, very complex. There's lots of gray areas. And so even though these case studies that I used were cases that had been completely identified, for the main character, that's not particularly clear. One of the first case studies that I used was a study that they found out it was actually the moon. And I think people were freaking out when they saw it, and there was a funny light that night, and from the angle that they looked, they were convinced they were seeing something in the sky.
And yes, one of the pieces is devoted to that case. It is called Moon Scene. So let's make a short pause and let's listen to that music piece from the show Extraterrestrial Events, so audience can get another glimpse what they can expect this Tuesday in Cork Opera House. Another beautiful performance by Phiip Connaugton from Extraterrestrial Events. And besides the moon case, you also have other cases, right?
The second case study that I used was probably about 90% of all the cases, which were lights in the sky, and they were actually disco lights in the sky. So in like rural discos, when they put those laser lights up into the sky, this drives in GEIPAN, I'd say 90% of Class A were disco lights. Like every weekend in France, when there's a disco, people are calling the police, going, "Oh my God, there's something in the sky," and this was interesting for me. I think the way I chose I went through 400. I think I went through the 470 or 446 cases. I think at the time there were, and I chose 4, and I chose them kind of choreographically in a spatial sense. So I think the first piece I chose was the moon. The second were these lights in the sky that are kind of geographically slightly or spatially closer. Then there was a fascinating case, which was a frozen blue thing, which this woman came out, and I think you have the music there. This woman came out of her, heard this noise on the top of her car and came out onto the street to see what had happened. And there was this blue crystal that had landed on her car, and it had broken up and it was melting all over the place. And so she put it in a plastic bag and she put it in the freezer, and she brought it to the police, who got in touch with the GEIPAN, and they did some analysis. And it turned out to be from an aeroplane. So it was human waste that had dropped from an aeroplane. And apparently this is quite a common thing. It normally doesn't land on your car.
Yeah, there is even Wikipedia page about it. Yeah, I also checked. So it seems it happens. That's great. And let's listen another audio piece from Extraterrestrial Events. The piece that is called Frozen Blue Thing, and it's speaking about the exact case that we just discussed. We played tonight several pieces from Extraterrestrial Events, a dance opera that will be performed in Cork Opera House this Tuesday, choreographed by Philip Connaughton, music by Michael Galan, and songs are performed by Phiip Connaughton. I think Phiip is also playing sort of a composite character, right? There are many different characters through her singing.
Well, I suppose the thing is, in the space of an hour or 50 minutes, I think the piece is, that she's going through all of these emotions, and she's kind of, and it's this operatic music, and she's this incredible singer who's danced and who's sung, I mean, in the great opera houses all over the world. And she's from Cork. Kim is a Cork native, but she's a superstar. She really is. And so she's got this amazing voice, and she's telling these kind of quite banal stories to this very, very dramatic operatic music. And there was a moment when I was kind of creating it that I kind of thought, wow, this is kind of crazy. All of these emotions that this lady is going through. And, the stories aren't particularly that exciting because I didn't want them to be. I wanted them to kind of be mundane in a way. I didn't want them to be kind of Steven Spielberg, UFO stories. And actually, I was with my mother, that I spoke about earlier. And my mother now has dementia. She's quite advanced dementia. Oh. And I was with her one day, and she was telling me she was kind of telling me all sorts of stories because her brain kind of shifts from one thing to the next, and it's kind of in the past, and then it's somewhere else, and it's somewhere else, and then it's in the present. And I was talking to her, and she was telling me all of these stories, but really dramatizing them in a very interesting way. And I thought, oh, you know what? That's okay. This is what the piece is. This makes perfect sense. And I think I could make sense of the drama for the individual. Yet as somebody that's listening to the story, you could kind of think, why are you being so dramatic about this? But of course, if you're living it, if you're living this experience, it could be very it can be whatever it needs to be for you. I don't know if that's particularly clear, or if I'm making sense with that, but
yeah, it's a great direction to go in. And even the premise is absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to see it. And like Tardigrade, it's a multidisciplinary work piece, right? You actually have the same team and I
have the same team. I have Michael Galan is back again with his incredible composing. Kim Sheehan. We've got 4 incredible dancers. I perform also. And and it's a very, very exciting. It's a very exciting piece. It's sold out in Paris. It's sold out in Dublin, and we're hoping it will do really well in Cork. We're so happy to be coming to the Cork Opera House, which of course is Kim's home, and I work in Cork a lot, so I feel like it's my second home. And it's so great also that the Opera House has decided to bring contemporary dance to this wonderful big space.
Absolutely amazing. October 24th. Tuesday, 8 p.m., Cork Opera House. And where do you go from here? Will you have another performance of this show, or you are already preparing something new?
Well, Kim at the moment is 7 months pregnant. So it's going to be very interesting as well, because we deal with the idea of birth and things. But so now we're going to have a big, beautiful, pregnant singer on stage.
Well, and like we said, show progresses as we go.
The show progresses, but the cast is getting bigger. And so we're going to wait till she has her baby, and then, we'll be touring it later in the year internationally as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you have some other piece in mind, or for now you will stick to this one and then you will see later?
Well, I'm working on another piece, which is called Assisted Solo, and that will be for September of next year. And that's going to be a very exciting piece with a very exciting cast, and it's kind of autobiographical, but it's still dealing scientifically, I suppose, with ideas of a multidimensional space.
Oh my God, I think you are so unique in that aspect, and that's what I like so much. And you are combining so many ideas, and I really like this, a little bit fringy areas and also scientific ones, and there are really relevant debates today in our society. So amazing, Philip. It was such a pleasure to speak with you tonight. We can invite the audience, definitely. And I can't wait to see the piece, and thank you so much for the interview, and let's stay in touch. If you will ever
I look forward to seeing you there.
Absolutely. If you will ever have any announcement feel free to send it to me. And it was such an honor to speak with you. And I went through so many of your interviews, and it was really amazing story of your life. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. All right, cheerio.
Thanks.